I'm John Madison, and I'm the general manager of our data center division, Trend Micro. And title and presentation is Securing Your Journey to the Cloud. Hands up, anybody who has heard of Trend Micro? Oh, plenty of hands, that's great. So, Trend Micro is the largest independent now security company. We're founded in the US, actually, in '88. Our headquarters is in Tokyo. A lot of our engineering is in Taipei, in Canada. A lot of marketing. I'm actually based in our Cupertino office, which is right next to the Apple building in Silicon Valley. About 3 years ago, we specifically put a lot of investment into 3 areas: server security, virtualization security, and of course, the conference today is talking about cloud security. As I said, we're the largest, what I call independent security company, with 48 of the top 50 global companies across all the major verticals. Now, when I go and speak to customers, CISOs, or CIOs, there's probably 4 major topics they want to discuss. One of them, which is the hottest topic, I think, is consumerization, or bring your own device. And I'm not going to talk about that today, because that would be about 6 hours of conversation. I will say that in terms of mobile threats, Android is proving the most vulnerable, although it's improved a lot recently. But actually, mobile apps are the area where people are attacking. Actually, in China, there's 2,000 variants of Angry Birds you can choose from. Only one is valid, by the way. There's also a neat app there called the Angry Wife. And you can mute and do all sorts of things, but that's actually a valid application. Today I'm going to talk about 3 things. Cloud computing, obviously, and the infrastructure, how that affects your security. I'm going to start with the threat environment today, the leading edge piece, which is usually threats against countries and governments. And then we'll finish on the regulatory environment and how that is affected in the cloud system. So another kind of questionnaire. Who's heard of APTs? Don't be embarrassed, it's fine. Yes, so actually APTs is an expression used by, or created by the government several years ago to talk about threats. They're not threats which are very persistent, which take months, sometimes years, to make themselves valid. I prefer to call them targeted attacks, because they're targeting specific information and against specific organizations. The threat life cycle of an APT is not too dissimilar from I'm out of sync here. There we go. It's not too dissimilar from threats of 2 or 3 years ago, except the techniques are slightly modified in each phase. So for example, there's only 2 ways you can really be infected, either through a vulnerability or through social engineering. APTs prefer social engineering, but instead of using quite broad techniques, they will zoom in using techniques such as spear phishing and study their targets very well to make sure when you see that email or you go to that website, you're very comfortable clicking or loading or transferring information. So it's very specifically going after your company. The next piece is what we call infiltration, or setting up the command and control sequences. They want to make sure once they've done the infection that they can communicate back out to what we call command and control capabilities. The next thing, which is very specific to APTs, is what I call lateral movement. Once they're inside your organization, they very stealthily move around to try and take credentials or try and infect other machines inside your organization. The 5th stage is to find out where the data is they're after, asset or data discovery. By the way, they use some of the same techniques that DLP systems use on data discovery. And of course, the final stage is to exit with the data to predefined locations. Here's a recent example, one called ShadowNet. This is actually came after the GhostNet system. It used a simple flash vulnerability to go inside, provided the exploit, actually got root access, then set up its communication command control systems, extracted the data, spread inside the organization. But the big difference between this ShadowNet and something 3 years ago is it only infected 200 computers. It was actually going after specific sites inside India to get confidential information from government organizations. It used social engineering, embedded malware, but only 200 computers were infected. Very targeted. These are some of the recent campaigns over the last 12 months. ShadowNet. Lucky Cat was the one that came out recently. GhostNet. And this map of the footprint of APTs, again, is very different from what you'd have seen 2 years ago. You can see the locations are very specific. Actually, if you can see ShadowNet, it's only in India. That's only where the place is infected. So a lot of the threat environment right now is focused on large organizations, but many times this type of threat is a forerunner to what's going to happen in enterprise organizations in the next 2 to 3 years. There's a blog, blog.trendmicro.com. If you're really interested in every detail of every threat that's going on to the last hour, you can log on there and read through to your heart's content. All right, so changing gears a bit from the threat environment to your journey to the cloud. Trend talk about what we call our journey to the cloud because, again, most of the customers I speak to have not moved to the cloud completely. They have a plan to get there at some point, but they have some physical infrastructure still. They've spent the last 18 to 24 months virtualizing a lot of their infrastructure inside the data center, and they'll have trials running inside or applications running inside the cloud. And so they need to be able to manage their security posture not only in the cloud, but also inside their virtualization environments and also inside their physical environments. And what's very important for Trend Micro is all the threat information we provide on to different organizations. What we really need is a platform that's able to interact and provide threat information to both the physical, the virtual, and the cloud. Excuse me a minute. And so what we build is a platform that will connect into your physical world still, a platform that connects into your virtual world, and a platform that also connects into your cloud world. And each of those environments have a different security posture that's required. Inside the physical world today, we see a lot of consolidation of security. So typically, 4 years ago, you'd have a different vendor for antivirus, a different vendor for HIPS, a different vendor for file integrity. Today, customers are looking to consolidate all that into one platform. Inside the virtual environment, they're looking to take advantage of agentless type connectivity to allow you to get the ROI on applications such as VDI. And then when we move to the cloud, data becomes a bigger concern. And so we see encryption technologies as being really important when you start moving to the cloud environment. And if you could use the control properly, you'd go in the right direction. And so you're probably familiar with all these types of security tools. They all require actually quite large groups of people, apart from maybe the firewall piece, to provide up-to-date information, whether it be IDS, IPS systems, whether it be antivirus signatures, whether these days it's whitelists of both mobile apps and your Microsoft apps, whether it's reputation of domains, DNS servers, URLs, or IPs. All this information needs to be fed, again, into your physical, your virtual, and cloud environment. So Trend have a platform called Deep Security. It's our platform for physical, virtual, and cloud environments. It consists of a central management system, and then agents which run inside your server environment. The agent can provide firewall, IDS, IPS, integrity monitoring, log inspection, antivirus, and numerous reputation systems, all in one agent, all controlled by one manager. It then connects into your other management systems, such as your SIM vendors. It can also provide either a virtual appliance or an agent into your virtual environment. I'm going to hands up again. I'm assuming everyone is virtualizing inside the data center. Anybody not? Yeah, and so having the same now manager that can manage your physical security as well as your virtual security becomes very important, because some of the characteristics of a virtual environment are very different from your physical environment. Not only are there new threats, such as inter-VM attacks, but also you need to be very careful, for example, when you're loading agents onto specific VMs. And there's numerous, of course, virtualization managers. They skip my mind right now, that provide the integration to the management piece. And then the piece we're seeing right now, so if I go back here, I would say about 40% of our customers are configured like this, just physically. I would say a good 90% of our customers are configured physical and virtual. And we're just seeing, although we've been talking about this probably for the last 12 months with customers, we're starting to see customers now also install their cloud environments into the same console. So when you install your cloud security, again, this is using an agent inside your cloud, you can now get all the same applications that you have with your physical or virtual environment. And what that means is there's now a single policy you can apply to all three environments, or change those policies depending on when your workload or application is working. And then the third piece inside there, of course, is you need the same integration into the management systems, which in this case is Amazon Web Services, so you can directly track the assets. And as you start moving into this environment, you need to add additional functionality to the management systems, and that is modular and multi-tenant capability, so you indeed can provide the same cloud capability back to your customers. One of the features, this is voted #1 by our customer team, is called a recommendation scan. And this scan allows you to set up scans of the agents in the different environments on a predetermined application or operating system. So once you've set it up, each of these environments are then scanned to that predefined recommendation scan. It saves a lot of time setting up the scan each time. So this is the console of Deep Security. I wish I had I think this has got a laser on, but you have a dashboard, like a lot of products, that bring all the threats together, all your configurations. But on the far left-hand side there, you actually have the capability to integrate into the three environments. And so you have your Microsoft environment, Windows servers, you have your virtualized environment, but also you can see all your cloud assets as well. So in one console, you can see both your physical, virtual, and cloud assets, and you can configure them, apply the security consoles, apply the security objects to those particular assets, all through a single console. It also provides, within 2 hours, all the vulnerability information you need to protect your assets, again, across all three environments. And one of the few companies For this type of product, which conforms to the common criteria, it's quite a tough criteria to get through, both EL4 and then also for PCI DSS labs. So I talked about deep security quickly, which provides what I call the common security modules across all the environments. This is a product called SecureCloud, which is specifically built for cloud environments. And that is, what we do is, actually this was mentioned earlier today by the CISO of Amazon. And what we can do is, inside your Amazon environment, inside your virtual machine, is apply an encryption agent, which encrypts all your data going through either from your cloud or through your customers into your cloud environment. So your data that's sitting on your EBS is actually encrypted. It's not working on S3. I want to differentiate. It's not on S3. It's sitting on your EBS systems, is encrypted. Now, the key thing here is, instead of Amazon controlling the keys, you control the keys. And so the keys either sit in your data center or in a SaaS service from Trend, and this allows you to decide when and where that data gets released. Okay? So not only is it providing encryption in the cloud here, but you have ownership of the keys, and only you can get access to that data no matter what happens in the cloud. This is a slide actually from Amazon, and again, the CISO, Stephen Schmidt, talked about this, in that it's a shared responsibility security inside Amazon. And so, obviously, Amazon provide a lot of security and regulations and audits of the facilities, physical security, virtualized infrastructure. But you as a customer have to provide some additional security for your applications, for your operating systems, additional firewalls, antivirus. And so this shared responsibility model needs to come together to make sure you have an end-to-end security picture for your cloud infrastructure. So the final piece of this is regulatory, and I think one of the most important standards, PCI. I know it's for the credit card industry. I always talk to customers about using this as a guideline. I think it's a very good set of regulations. Deep security provides, I think, at least 8 pieces of your PCI compliance: network segmentation, firewall, antivirus, virtual patching, web application protection, logs, IDS, IPS, and file integrity monitoring. So with one product, you can virtually fulfill all your main security modules of PCI through the Trend Micro Deep Security. Last year, there was PCI DSS 2.0, which was brought about for virtualized environments, because up until then, you weren't allowed to put credit card information or process it through virtualized environments. And this talked about a number of different things. One of the last things they talked about was cloud computing. In fact, the need to have both cloud vendor at the physical level or virtualization level, also the security across the data at the application level. And so again, using deep security, you can provide PCI DSS 2.0 guidelines. And so this is something we set up in our last release of software. It's kind of very new. We've got a couple of customers using this. And that is connecting your security posture with your data security. So in this example, let's say you've got both SecureCloud and Deep Security installed in your Amazon cloud. What we can do is set certain policies on the security modules. Let's say, for example, the antivirus scanner is out of date. Then what we can do is send a contextual message to the SecureCloud encryption module to say, hey, this particular instance there's an out-of-date antivirus scanner. Make sure you shut down all access to the data sitting on that particular server. So now you can see some contextual awareness between what I call security elements, security modules, and the data protection modules inside there. And I think contextual security, as we go forward, is going to be the only way to stop threats such as APTs. There's quite a few good resources these days. Gartner actually specializes in a lot of the cloud security. There's several analysts who talk about this contextual awareness. If you are a subscriber to Gartner, then make sure you read some of their virtualization and cloud papers that talk about contextual awareness. And just finally, as I said, Trend specializes in cloud. We've always been, actually for the last 3 years, we've been the #1 vendor for server security. Last year, 2 years ago, we voted the #1 vendor for virtualization security. And as of 3 weeks ago, we were just voted the #1 vendor for cloud security as well. So that is an area of specialization for us. We put a lot of development into making sure our systems can connect into clouds and provide the latest threat information. And that was it in 40 minutes. Is there any simple questions that you have? I think you could even just either come to the mic or come a bit closer.
What is the acronym APT?
All right. Well, the question was, what's the acronym APT? It's called Advanced Persistent Threats. Okay. As the name suggests, they're advanced because they use targeted attacks, and they're persistent in that they could stay in your environment for a year or 6 months until they get to where they need to get.
Question is actually, I got one of your brochures. It said something about being enabling HIPAA compliance. What's your SLA on the HIPAA compliance / PCI? What would, if there's a breach, where does the finger get pointed first, I guess?
That's a good question. It depends on how much you've installed. Trend do have some associations with insurance vendors, actually. I think Chubb was one of them, where if you do switch on all the Trend elements of our deep security platform, they will provide you an insurance certificate against certain elements and breaches. I think that's a really good combination of security and then protecting yourself thereafter. It's a really good question.
For the question that I work with a lot is the difference between network intrusion detection and host-based intrusion detection in the cloud. In Amazon, if your visibility into the network is limited to the incoming traffic at the hypervisor level, what's the role of, is there a role for network intrusion detection within, for example, a VPC or your own environment? Or is host-based intrusion detection combined with some other forms of threat, I guess, management or detection or element? Or where does that whole thing work out?
Yeah, I think usually, like HIPS systems, like for example, Trend have a HIPS system, which they're very signature-based on that application or OS, or exploits which are happening to that particular target server. Traditional kind of what I call mainframe IPS, IDS systems, which sit at the front of networks, are much broader. So they include a much broader set of threats. They're kind of there to stop hackers getting in any way, and they will include some behavioral monitoring, etc. So I would always say you should try and install both for a layered protection. Always with security systems, doesn't matter which vendor you are, there'll be some signatures some vendors have and some vendors you don't have, and vice versa. And so if you have a reasonably good IPS, IDS installed on your network side to cover the broader set of threats, and then a HIPS set of rules which are specific to your application, I think that's the preferred layout. Does that answer your question? So I think in Amazon, you would have to, I'm not sure actually on this, you would have to install your own kind of virtual machine type IPS, IDS system. Trend does have one. It's actually, right now, only connecting into kind of virtual environments. That is something we're thinking about for the future. Or today, you can deploy a trend HIPS type solution, which has this subset of IDS, IPS rules for that application. But we always recommend you deploy the full set of applications. I sometimes see customers buy our products and say, oh, I'm just going to deploy the antivirus piece when all the elements are there. We definitely recommend, because of the nature of APTs, Advanced Persistent Threats, which have this life cycle that varies now quite a lot, both in the threat vector, the actions and commands, you never really know whether it's going to be a social engineering or vulnerability, a communication through a DNS sinkhole or whatever to get back out. Try and cover as many of the threat vectors as you can with the full security portfolio.
Great question. When you were talking about encryption on the EDS volumes, two parts. What kind of encryption do you have? I mean, like triple DES or 256 key length? And also, what if I lose my keys? Is there any stenographic capabilities for reconstructing that data set? And when I freeze that off to S3 as storage, how does the key management play?
Those are all great operational questions. I think it's 256. I'm looking at my team back here. They were nodding, so that's good. I got one right. The second question was losing the keys. We do have it depends how you deploy. Now, you could have it deployed in your data center with your server. So at that point, you've got to provide the backup and capabilities. If it's deployed in the Trend SaaS data center, we do have disaster recovery for the keys as well.
Perhaps that's better, the wrong word. Suppose if the keys do not exist, if they're lost.
Oh, if they're lost completely?
Like I want them to be lost.
Oh, you want them to be lost? Oh.
Can you reconstruct that data?
I think we can based on our services. I'm not sure if we can if you've deployed in your server environment. But I can check that. If you give me a card, I can check that. And then your last question was, are you allowed 3 questions? Yeah, we're allowed 3 questions.
Well, when you burn that off to storage, which I guess in Cloudland it's S3.
S3, yeah.
So how does the key management work in there? Is it say burnt off and encrypted?
No, yeah, well actually our next release of our product's working on S3 as well, and so you could have both combined and we can tell. Right now we can't tell. You'll be doubly encrypted or whatever, depending if you want to carry it through. In our next release, we'll have the capability to do S3 encryption as well, and have some capability to know if it's already been switched, if Amazon have switched on their piece as well. So there'll be some sort of communication link that goes on. Those are actually 3 really good questions. Anybody else have some simpler questions?
One more. So getting back